Thank you for having me here. I come from I think, a completely different world. This morning I was told that you struggle to get your users to fill in the metadata. My company is paid to fill in the metadata for corporations. In fact, if you want to look at the Google Base project, which I guess is the closest thing Google has to a repository, that's how you get into Google Maps, and some people pay us £100 an hour to get their metadata sorted out. So let's explore those issues a bit. Yes, .com crash. Remember that? A lot of big brands put a lot of money into the .com boom. A lot of venture capital firms, a lot of angel investors. I actually think this office got off quite lightly. I've heard of people ripping the copper wires out the walls in order to try and claw back some of their cash. And the .com crash taught us some lessons. If you build it, they do not come. Apologies if you missed the keynote speech. This wasn't planned. This has worked out quite well, or badly. I don't know. Another fallacy I hear is that people have less time. Really? Are there less than 24 hours in the day now? Is there a big atomic clock conspiracy going on? No, people have the same amount of time. What you have to do now is fight for their attention. So the first step is win somebody's attention, and the second step is to then reward them, give them a carrot to keep their attention. Now this presentation, I think, I've been calling it all morning, a bit like a throwing a stone across a lake and trying to get it to bounce, because I'm going to touch on a lot of things, but I'm not going very deep into anything. Hopefully that means at least one slide to interest you. Feel free to ask questions. From the commercial point of view, there are two ways to turn information into wealth on the internet. You can stop other people getting to that information. For example, kryptonite lock for your bike. A couple of years ago, someone discovered that you can take the top off a Bic pen, wobble it around in the lock, and the whole kryptonite lock fell apart. And that information came to light on the internet. It cost kryptonite tens of millions of pounds. If they had stopped people discovering that or replaced that story or commentated along with that with their own opinion, then that might have saved them some money. You also have promoting favourable information. And crudely speaking, you might be on lewis.co.uk and you want somebody types in new washing machine for your website to come top of Google and therefore increase your chances of somebody buying that new washing machine from you. But sometimes these two combine. And it's a truth in the commercial world that people consider websites returned at the top of Google to be more trustworthy, more authoritative than websites found later on. I don't know if this is an issue in the world of repositories. Really not certain if there's any lecturers or professors out there who wonder, gosh, when you type in this generic keyword into this repository, my papers come on page 2, whereas my competitor for funding, their papers come on page 1. Possibly something to think about. Ooh, can you just see? Yes. And from the commercial world, there's a definite interest in metadata. These figures come from Big Mouth UK offices, starting way back when we founded in '97, measuring the hours per year we spend writing metadata. Now, I don't mean meta tags on web pages, because search engines pay those different amounts of attention. I mean metadata, the data that we know the search engines extract from those pages. And I think in 2008, we'll probably hit about 45, which, let's do the maths. That's, if you did that, that's about 12 hours a day, isn't it? If you didn't take a holiday. So again, this is one person running a repository. If you're prepared to put in 12 hours a day, then you're a better person than I am. But with Google and other search engines, it's not all about the metadata, which is generally the author describing his own work. There's also citations and links. So let's just take 100 academic papers in chemistry, and let's not bother to read them. Let's skip straight to the citations. Let's read those, and then calculate which paper is cited the most often. Is that your authoritative paper from chemistry? Well, Google thinks so. So that's what Google did to leave metadata behind the little and to take it to the next level. And I think, from what I've heard this morning, For repositories to do something similar, there needs to be a lot more cooperation between the systems. I said at the start that I think we need to win people's attention, and you're struggling to get academics to upload their papers. Well, if I was an academic, I'd be really pleased if I typed my name in, Google came back with my homepage on the university first, and then a CV worth of references to papers second, especially as people consider websites returned at the top of Google to be authoritative and trustworthy. So I did this other experiment, postdoc placements, and this is the top 10 results from google.co.uk, just pages from the UK. And it's pretty much dominated by universities, which is a good thing. It's only when you get into position 10 that we find the first commercial job website. I'm not sure how to classify tip-top jobs. It seems to be a sort of university-run mailing list. But I thought Bristol did very well there. Of all the brands I didn't immediately think of, all the universities I didn't immediately think of, Bristol there. And then another one for funding, it's picking a random research council. Searched again, Manchester and Bristol were the only two universities I found in the first page for Google. So right now, if I'm thinking of going to a university as a postdoc to do something in physical science, and I wanted funding, well, Bristol is going to be pretty much certain one I'll be looking at. So we can see how that works at Bristol. But we also have this concept of personal branding. So this is a search on my name. It's great for Bristol that they're there when somebody's searching for funding, but can you imagine how great it would be if you were the lecturer whose website you came up when you search for a funding term? It gives you a lot of power. It gives you more chance to win that funding over somebody else. So perhaps in the world of repositories, you do have a carrot to give to your users. Please upload your papers. Please provide the metadata. And in exchange, what you might see, now this will obviously depend how the repository is coded, you might see your personal brand on search engines and public search engines improve. When people type in an area of academia or your name, you will be happier with the results. Nothing to do with academia, but this is the closest I could think of in the commercial world to compare. Because a press release is about information. It's generally just a single page, A4 at most. And it's designed to spread a bit of information as far and wide as you could hope. For example, company X is appointing somebody. Another company is bought another. Or maybe you're launching a new product. But crucially, this isn't marketing. It's writing down the facts and making them publicly available, akin to uploading it to a repository. So here's a wee case study. Before coming here this week, I took 25 random company-wide launches, product something or other, press releases. And on average, it took about 2.4 hours to write that press release. It generally takes so long because there's a committee involved. People need to agree that you've got the brand right and you've been truthful and the product is aimed at the right people, even though it's a press release. Half an hour to apply appropriate tags or metadata to that press release, and then over 6 hours is spent distributing it to hubs on the internet. So if you are kind enough to attribute the tagging and metadata process to the creation rather than the promotion of that press release, there's a 2-for-1 ratio there. I asked some postdoc friends how long it took them to write an academic paper. That was a mistake. I should have asked how long is a piece of string. There was some consensus that if you don't include the actual experiments or the analysis or any of the work, you could probably get a paper together in a couple of days or a week, and then you might send it off to a magazine if you're lucky, and then there's a review process, and then it's public. But the creation to promotion ratio is infinite because there's actual no promotion done at all. All the effort is done in the creation, which from my point of view seems insane. Because why are you spending all that much time and then chucking it into a black hole? Or not even chucking it into a black hole, leaving it at the black hole, which is your desk. And then, of course, because we like to analyze how well things have done, nearly 2 hours were spent analyzing how often press releases were looked at, by who, where do they come from. which is, it's not quite as long as spent writing the damn thing, but nearly. So this is a little review of how the press release system works. These are 3 random press release hubs that will release the press releases to. A few journalists go there, not very many people. But crucially, Google News goes there. And from Google News, lots of people see it. You might disagree with Google. Maybe a press release isn't a piece of news, and that's certainly a widely held belief. But what we have here is a system by distributing our press release, or think about it, our paper to the right sources. We know that the system takes care of itself, and everybody who could possibly want to see that press release has. We've got their attention. If they include the right keywords and they've got Google Alerts set up, then they'll probably get an email to say that's available now. I tried to have a look to see whether there's anything similar in academia. And this is an American site, PubMed, where medical papers go. And through in the API, there's a relatively new site, I think it's run by Stanford, who provide a process of discovery and actually trying to incentivize their users to cooperate by allowing them to discuss and to rate the papers. So I'm not sure, I'm relatively new to repositories, but I'm not sure they're quite dead yet, because we do have new sites today helping. So Google News, you could see, was clearly an influencer. We knew that sending our press release to those hubs and that Google visited those hubs was enough to get hundreds of thousands of people to see the press release. So we put a lot of work into influencing. And this is a really crazy map. And it's one of our attempts to visualize the flow of information. So the site we care about is in the middle, and we're just mapping out all the sites that link to it. And you can see that there's little hubs all around the hub in the middle. Now, this chart tells us a few things. One, that's because it's quite messy, that suggests to me it's authentic. There's been no attempt to manipulate. Now, because this is a commercial world, if links are votes, if citations are worth stuff, then you can expect people to try and game the system. So the search engines try and cancel out invalid citations. I think if that came to academia, it would get very messy. But also, it shows our clients that they are not in control. I've heard today concerns that if you upload your paper to a repository, do you lose control of your paper? In our world, once you're public with something, you have to learn you've lost control. People will talk about you whether you like it or not. And ideally, what you do is you encourage people to talk about it in areas where you have influence over. So again, if I was university, I might think, gee, I have influence over my repository. If people are going to discuss the papers, I'd rather they discuss it within the bounds of my repository, in my house, rather than having a discussion about something in an area I have no control over. So we like to study the flow of information, and here's an easy way to do it. Pick a topic. Right, let's see where that topic first surfaced on the internet. And in this case, it was in this blog. And then let's see where that information flew over time. From that blog, it goes to another major blog. That may be where it hits the headlines for the first time. And more blogs start writing about the topic. And then later on, maybe later that week, you see The Guardian and This is Bristol, following a Bristol theme, are all writing about that topic. So again, where time is money, if I want to influence The Guardian with This is Bristol, I will cut out the major blog and I will go straight to that influencing blog in the future, especially if you can see this pattern repeated over and over time. So this tells me you do not need to be big to be influential. You can be a small and perfectly formed repository that has a couple of APIs maybe. The paper uploaded there, you can be certain that we distributed appropriately, will have an influence on your social network, that map, and the paper will go to all the places you need it to go. In fact, this is a map we did charting The Guardian, or the Media Guardian, a subsection of The Guardian's, their own network. And as you can see, it's pretty crazy. One of the tags at the bottom there is a site called Delicious, which I'm just going to focus on for a minute. I suspect many of you are already using Delicious. So if you're not aware of this already, Delicious is about to undergo a major technical change. They're dropping the cute.us domain and they're going to .com. Now, rather alarmingly, they're predicting that their password recovery system will not survive the migration. So if you think you might have forgotten your delicious password, you have a couple of days to go retrieve it. So if you learn nothing else helpful from me today, you've at least learned that. Anyway, a random delicious page of another a chemistry website. This has all the elements on it. And the great thing about delicious is it's tagged, not by the person who wrote the website, but by the delicious users. Peer metadata or peer-reviewed metadata. And in the commercial world, where people have an incentive to be fined for things, search engines, repositories don't trust them to describe their work 100% accurate all the time. So how other people describe the papers is interesting. So this is why the community is a good resource, and if you can tap into it, you can get your metadata provided to you by other people who you can trust. What would Google do? There's a book coming by that name. It's probably going to be worth a read. So if you're not, this is teaching to suck eggs. Google crawls the web. It doesn't API into databases. It doesn't interrogate servers. It uses automated programs to visit web pages. That's one process. That data is sent back to their indexer, which is another process. So Google decouples the relationship between storing data and then searching the data. And there's another semi-new initiative from Google and Yahoo and Microsoft and AOL on how to find data. Rather than let the search engines crawl, you can use the sitemaps.org protocol simply to point to your data. And all the major search engines use the schema, and look how simple it is. And I think my mum could write that XML data. And the key thing is the big search engines all use it together. So you have commercial incentive to go, okay, fine, I will do that. And because it's shared, lots of websites do, and the search engines spend less of the resources crawling the web, which saves them money. And again, I'm sure you're aware of this, but there's Google Scholar. Again, let's think about the branding. I did a search for Edinburgh, and I did a search for Glasgow. Edinburgh's thrashing Glasgow. If I was Glasgow, I now potentially have commercial incentive to upload some more papers that have the word Glasgow in it. So if people are doing comparisons of cities, where should I go to university? The Glasgow brand, if it were, was back in there. So again, I'm thinking, what incentive can we give people to actually use the repository? Moving towards the end, information has some worth. Facebook, 15 billion. Wow. And it's rubbish. It's rubbish for an advert. Facebook's valuation is not geared at the little banners that pop up. In fact, Facebook gets most of its money from those annoying little virtual gifts you can buy for $1 and send to your friends. That's where most of its money comes from. But the potential of Facebook is a massive repository of the most precious information available, yours. All that personal data. And that's why Facebook is worth, well, it probably isn't worth $15 billion, but that's where the evaluation is now. And as you can expect, Google's not taking this lying down. Google's program is open social, which they're saying will be more open than Facebook, and it's open again. Why don't other people come along and use ours? And you can hack it and you can change it. So I think in the very near future, we'll see very big companies fighting over ways to win your attention and persuade you to upload your personal data to their database. And finally, some figures. This is, of course, I can't tell you the names, but one set of personal injury lawyers for every white paper. It's not really a white paper in the academic sense, but it's a white paper to them. Every time one of those is downloaded off their site, it generates for them about £125. I know. Do the maths at the end of the year. They'll bring a white paper download, lead to new custom, the amount of money they charge, £125. If you think that's impressive, another legal firm specializes in looking after the reputation and the copyright issues of celebrities. Maybe this is the same legal firm that terrorizes poor academic institutes who are trying to upload popular music to the repository. Every case study they download, on average, will bring them over £10,000. So you can clearly see the incentive they have by getting those case studies indexed and found. And that's hopefully why it's worth paying other people to do the metadata to ensure the search engines can find them. Thank you very much. No questions mean I was comprehensive and thorough, which I like.
Usually a comprehensive another question that the chair does. And what struck me is that this notion of competition for attention and therefore attention leading to potential customer and transaction. The question of taking that into the academic domain, either where money matters or where the reward is recognition of something else, it's not so easy for us to do the calculations. As we said before, most access or request means are payment of money.
Yeah.
So you can see the Visa bill go click, 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 and someone's done something, and they've got the gratification, and it's for a short purpose.
Yeah.
In terms of the competition, say for students, that's like a long purchase, and often the purchase is made completely somewhere else, and you don't know what the impact is. And similarly, I think in terms of the readership of whether the download of the article leads to somebody reading it, take note of it, and put it in their article or somewhere else. You've got a very disconnected world. So trying to demonstrate the reward is, to either the spin you make to your vice chancellor or the spin you make to your researcher is more difficult to justify. You can't give them the bottom line.
Quite right. Shooting from the hip, from what I've heard this morning, I think the currency you need to trade in is ego. Appeal to the
Vanity comes first.
vanity of the people you want to do the uploads. Upload this, and it'll be worth your while because you will have more prestige. If you can show the lecturers that if you upload your paper and it gets downloaded 3 times, if you upload the paper and apply the appropriate metadata, it gets downloaded 30 times. I really think that will encourage people to use the system better and more properly.
Attention is the key value thing. Am I right in thinking there's talk about an attention markup language being floated around at the moment?
Yeah, there's a lot of experiments with markup languages going around, and the recent one, which I think is brilliant, it's not quite attention, it's more behavioral. So you can have a software solution running in the background that keeps an eye on what has your attention. So if you're visiting, say, 4 shops, and you visit, say, some sporting pages on 4, and then on one of the shops you look up some flowers for your mum because it's her birthday. That's all captured in an XML file somewhere. Now, the next stage we haven't got to yet, but research shows the public are relatively okay with, is this ability to visit a 5th shop, let it upload your XML profile. That shop could then realize you're actually really into sports, and that flower thing was a one-off, and it's then better able to service your needs. But the deal is, the shop has to delete that record it has of you within a week. The XML file belongs to you, and it kind of evolves and grows, and it maps your interests. This comes from the fact that if you walk into a supermarket, if you try and get out again, you're probably seeing 127 products. The supermarket's time, how long it takes people to get in the door and out the door, it's like 15 minutes, 30 minutes. If you spent 30 minutes on John Lewis would have thought their website's broken. Shopping on the web, you're in there for a minute, you typed in what you want on Google, you've landed on the page that will service your need. If their usability of their checkout system's great, you'll swim through there really quickly, and then you'll go again. So it's very hard for John Lewis to work out what you're interested in. And just John Lewis by itself, if you just bought one tennis racket and the flowers for your mum, John Lewis would assume that you're half interested in flowers, half interested in sports. Whereas if John Lewis can share that aggregate data, you can see that the flowers is more of a one-off.
Tricky to see that fits into the academic world, but
I think so, yeah. Well, potentially canvassing for new students. People research at university quite a lot, but yes, I don't think that's going to be an immediate sell, no.
Does anybody know of any projects or actual attempts to build what we would call an institutional repository out there in retail Google space? In other words, just use that virtuality of somebody else's thing to do it. Is anybody doing that?
I think one of the problems that comes with, I'm over here. I think one of the problems that comes with that is that if you use Google disk space or Amazon disk space, there's a question on who owns the data. And I think academic institutions in particular are very conservative, as has been said before, about their data, and they don't want it outside their systems. And the other one I've heard is that what's going to be around longer, my institution or Google? And people think that their institution, their computer systems are going to be around longer than Google. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
But that's possibly where you look at the separation of archiving and finding. You want the university to archive and keep and lock it away in a vault. And if you can tap into some other more commonly used mechanism for data discovery, I'm not saying Google, but maybe something collective, even if that turns out to be transitory, you benefit from that. You get more worth from your archive while that's alive. And if that goes away, that's fine, because your archives are still, your servers are still sitting there in your vault. You haven't lost anything.
Yeah, I personally think that there's a lot of room for experimentation, because when you talk about the objects and whose data is it, etc., if you want the stuff to be read, and it's just a facsimile of something, you haven't, I mean, the thing about the digital is you've still got it, even if somebody else has got it. And given that somebody even downloads it from your repository, hey, that means it's out there, it's gone. And so if they put it up somewhere, they put it up there, you're not going to chase it down every copy and insist that it's taken down, because actually the author wants it read. So it seems to be somehow we've got to find out what to break.
It's this notion of control, isn't it? Yeah. You're not in control. If you publish something, you forfeit a degree of control.
The other point, if I just might misuse the joke opportunity or whatever, is that when we're looking at the social world, networking world of our students and of our staff, there is still this notion about when the students want to be invaded by their work world. I mean, I've heard somebody describe that quite nicely, that, hey, it's really good if the lecturer comes for a drink with you afterwards, but you don't want them turning up for a disco. You know? So in the sense that if the students are hanging out on Facebook, that's fine if you just do something controlling Facebook. But hey, you don't want your lecturer turning up on your, in your space, because actually the person's presenting a very different face somewhere else. So I think somewhere we've got to work out what the academic domain is for and use it for that sort of reputation purposes. But on the other hand, recognise that there's the attention grabbing is somewhere else. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.